Well, yesterday morning, you guys heard me talk to legend Jerry Reynolds as he says goodbye. Not goodbye to everybody, just goodbye to the broadcasts as he'd been winding down. And then I pick up the paper today and I read that another one of those foundational pieces, maybe the foundational piece to our Kings broadcasts, is he's showing no signs of slowing down, and he's in it for the long haul. We have an opportunity, and as always, a pleasure and honor and a privilege to talk to one of my favorite people in or out of sports, and one of my favorite golf partners, the one, the only, the G-Man, Gary Gerould. Hello, sir.
How you doing, Dave?
Well, Mike,
I chuckle when you talk about golf. that game can drive you crazy. Can you imagine having to make your living playing golf?
Oh my goodness! With the Masters this weekend, the one thing that keeps I always think about this, G-Man. I've had days where I'll have a few holes that are great, and then of course I blow up and it all falls apart, and I feel terrible. And I imagine doing that for a living, and I have a good Thursday, Friday, and then maybe Saturday on the 9th hole, I hit a triple bogey, and it's over. I don't know how they do this.
You got to be so mentally strong. I've enjoyed the game, and in the last couple of years, I've enjoyed it more because I've had more opportunities to play some additional time, and not doing the traveling with the racing and one thing or another that commanded my summers and so on and so forth. But it really is. It's a humbling experience. I was telling someone earlier that just a couple of days ago, I double bogeyed 4 of the first 6 holes playing over at El Macero. And then I parred 5 of the next 6. So now, how does that happen? How does that happen? But I've enjoyed, watching. I was so happy for Kevin Sutherland, the fact that he won the Schwab Championship, the final Legends or Seniors Championship of the year down in Phoenix, and to win that playoff yesterday, and that was so cool.
Well, now that I think about it, I'd forgotten about this, but one last note on golf. A birdie told me, no pun intended, that you actually played recently with my big boss, my friend Steve, who just loves playing with you. So just do me a favor, just between us, not that anyone's listening. If you play with him again, I'm sure you will. If you want to sneak in that Carmichael Dave sure is a great guy. He's underpaid. I mean, I'm all for it.
The underpaid part, particularly, right?
Right. Yeah, that's more believable. So
yeah, I've had an opportunity to play with him 3 or 4 times over the last few weeks, and good fun.
Absolutely.
And we're supposed to be talking about our pal,
I know,
Jerry, and here we are talking about golf of all things.
Well, listen, we're going to get to Jerry Reynolds here momentarily. I'm going to make you even more uncomfortable. I am not getting into Jerry Reynolds week officially yet without acknowledging that the G-Man back for another year. We have to acknowledge that and you feel the love from this fan base, and there's been some broadcasting changes. Let's be honest. The Kings have, may not have had the most consistency on the floor, but one thing that's been very consistent has been the broadcast team, and it's a team that looks really altogether completely different than it did just a few years ago, with the exception of the legendary Gary Gerould. So first off, on me, I am a lifelong diehard fan, and I speak for all the fans. We love you. Congratulations, and thank God you're coming back. I do want to ask you, was it a decision at all for you? Was there any moment where you thought, I don't know or is this just let's keep going and make it happen, Captain?
No, it's basically let's keep going if in fact the opportunity is there. And I have frequently said in recent years that I continue to love what I do and the opportunity that I have, and I'm humbled by that, and I'm humbled by the amazing support and backing of so many Kings fans and within the organization. But I frequently said, as long as I'm healthy, as long as it's still fun, as long as I feel like I'm wanted, I'm all in. It's just that simple.
I would imagine, too, as long as Miss Marlene gives you permission as well. I imagine that's one of the...
Yep. No, and it's always been a multiple agreement in that sense. And she obviously and the family have just been such amazing supporters. And, you know how it is when you're on the road as much as I have been in my life. And that being said, the last month now, since the middle of March, and this COVID experience, I've never gone this long, in the last 50 years without being on an airplane or whatever. It's so bizarre in so many different ways, but it's something that we are all having to deal with. And, hopefully we find our way a little bit easier, and hopefully, before too many more weeks, months go by, we'll be able to get more fans at venues. And, there are a lot of things that have yet to be determined as far as the Kings and all the other NBA teams are concerned. So it's a work in progress. That's for sure. And there've been some changes, and I love the fact that I still have the opportunity to be involved. And I can't thank the Kings organization and the people who've been so kind over the years.
One of the calming voices of this station, KHTK, Gary Gerould, who you hear on with his play-by-play each and every King season, which will be starting here in just over a month. Let's talk about our friend Jerry Reynolds and you. I mean, forget what I think. Everyone thinks the world of Jerry. When you think Kings basketball, you think of Jerry Reynolds, but he's been a colleague and a friend and a traveling partner of yours for so many years. I mean, where do you even start when you talk about the great Jerry Reynolds?
I sometimes shake my head in wonderment, and the good Lord works in strange and mysterious ways many, many times. But one of the great fortunes of my life was the fact that in 1985, when the Kings came from Kansas City to Sacramento, one of the very first people that I encountered was Jerry Reynolds and his wife Dodie, and their son Jay and daughter Danielle, and they just became, for whatever reason, they became great friends, and that relationship has flourished over the years. I dearly love the man. I just, we all know about his down home Jerryisms and one thing or another, but there's just something about the guy. He has so much charisma. He has so much love for the game. He has so much appreciation for the fan support. And like you say, it's just, how can you not love Jerry Reynolds? He's just such a great guy.
When I had Jerry on yesterday morning, when I was asked on Friday what was my favorite Jerry memory, and I keep saying this, by the way, Jerry's not, he didn't pass away. Jerry's still around. He's still going to do a podcast. Jerry's still,
thank God.
You're right. He's still Jerry. But when somebody retires like this, and I know you and me and a lot of people close to him knew this was coming over the summer, and he thought this out. But when you think about a top Jerry memory, the first thing I said was, well, some of my favorite Jerry memories I can't say on the radio, but I thought about the sign off with he and Grant, which is certainly a bittersweet memory. When he choked up, when Grant choked up, and was really along with the work you did, which I very much remember. The three of you were really personifications of how the fans felt and how emotional it was. I know it's an unfair question, G-Man, but is there a memory or something specific that stands out with you with Jerry in his career?
Well, and there are several, and obviously that what you've just mentioned would be one of those, and because it was such pure emotional reaction and passion for what we love to do, and the friends on the threshold of being moved away from us and torn away from us, it was gut wrenching, and it was not an easy time, and it's easy for me to understand. The emotion was right there, and all of us in our own way had to battle that each and every time the Kings took the floor, wondering if this was going to be the last time that would be in this particular arena. Would this be the last time in Sacramento? Would we be able to continue such an emotional roller coaster? And so that ranks very high on the list. There are others. And some of them aren't, they aren't pleasant memories.
Right.
I think about the night that Jerry went down face first on the floor directly in front of me at the old Arco Arena. He had turned. He was upset about the way the game was progressing and upset about a call. And he slammed his hands down on the padded media table right directly in front of me, and then turned and hit the floor. And because I was standing right there, and I saw that his hands didn't go down to try to protect himself from the fall, I knew it was really, really serious. And I my heart was in my throat in trying to find words to frame and to explain what was happening, and seeing your friend motionless, just on the other side of the table, right literally at your feet, and trainer Bill Jones racing over and ready to administer, CPR. It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. And then, so much to our relief, that later that night, we went to the hospital after the game, and the fact, we were learning that, he was okay, and it wasn't a heart attack, and it was just like, oh my gosh! I mean, you talk about 180-degree flip of emotions, and then an appreciation for his health and well-being. That's something that is forever etched in my memory, and it may be right at the top of the list, along with so many other things that made him so unique as a broadcaster, as a coach, and of course, Dave, we all know. I mean, if there was a hat to be worn in the Kings organization, yeah, Jerry Reynolds wore it at some point along the way, and I'm so amazed at what he was able to do, and to sustain relationships, and to do it in that same, carefree type manner. Just nobody like Jerry Reynolds in terms of what he did for the organization in so many different capacities.
Gary Gerould joining us, you're taking me down a path I didn't think I'd go down, and Jerry mentioned yesterday morning him passing out, and every time we talk about that, he just always says he's thankful that the NBA rescinded the technical foul fine that was given to him. So
I think it was Blaine Reichelt, if I recall.
Right? Yeah, I don't think they could have rescinded that fast enough. But then, and thank goodness everything was, of course, okay with Coach Reynolds. But the road you're taking me down, G-Man, and forgive me because, and I'm not trying to do an age thing here, but a lot of times I was, and many adults with children listening now, we were teenagers or young kids growing up, and people like you and Coach Reynolds were, your family members. You come into our ears, you come into our homes, you help guide us through this, and certainly we've known our share of downs on the floor, but you mentioning Jerry, it makes me think of how this franchise has been touched by things like Ricky Berry, has been touched by things like Bobby Hurley, and Wayman Tisdale, and so many of the things that this fan base has had to suffer through that have nothing to do with on the floor. And then, of course, not life or death, obviously, but as you mentioned, the relocation. You and Jerry were cornerstones and are cornerstones of being able to kind of talk us through the whole thing. And I would imagine as his counterpart, you would smile thinking of if somebody has to help get people through things like that on an emotional level, of course, you know how we feel about you, but I can't think of anybody better than Jerry Reynolds.
Yeah, always a smile, always that self-deprecating humor, and always just a special twist. I was talking to him on the phone a couple of days ago, just checking and seeing how things were going, and some of the challenges that their family is experiencing right now, and we were reminiscing about a couple of things, and he's chuckling and said, "Yeah, G-Man, we've been to that county fair and we rode every ride, didn't we?"
Right.
Nobody would would frame it in that context. I mean, it's so typical of Jerry Reynolds, and those are the things that just make him so dearly beloved.
And I want to bring it back to you for a second, and then we'll get into some more basketball stuff. But again, it's always fun to talk to you because I never plan what I'm going to ask you. You always take me down many different roads, and forgive me, but both you and Jerry, one thing you unfortunately have in common is you've both been touched with trying family situations, and we know about the tragedy you suffered this year, and God bless you for that. And Jerry's going through his thing, and I would imagine throughout that each other, your colleagues, and really the game of basketball. We always talk about what you have given us, but again, I don't think I'm out of bounds by saying, especially in tougher times, I would imagine the basketball also gives back to you, and a lot of normalcy involved with that as well. Well,
you're absolutely right. There's no doubt about it. And one of the things that that just blew me away after we lost our daughter Beth back in March, the end of March, was the outpouring of support from so many different areas, and the fact that so many people within the Kings organization made it a point to call and to talk and to say, if you want to talk, if you need, there's an ear here, and I'm talking about everybody from Luke Walton to some of the other assistant coaches to players like Bogdan Bogdanovic and Harry Giles and all the different players texting and reaching out. And it just, I can't tell you, Dave, how much that meant at the time, how much that means now. And the fact that, and I'm not bashful about, the fact I'm 80 years old. I'm an old man in a young man's game. And I'm so blessed to have these relationships, and the fact that 20-year-olds are reaching out to offer support, and it's become much more difficult, of course, the generational gap from the time when the Kings came to Sacramento, and a time when the Lionel Simmons and the Wayman Tisdales and the Rory Sparrows and LaSalle Thompson and Reggie Theus and Eddie Johnson, and so many of those people came to our home, and we would have holiday get-togethers and one thing or another, and there was a special rapport. Well, it's one thing when you're closer in age, but it's entirely something else when you're, in some instances, 60 years older than the guys who are putting the Kings uniform on and are playing. So it has extraordinary meaning to me, and I think it's a tribute to the Kings organization and what they stand for. And so many times we get caught up in the flack of, the success or the lack of success, and the fact that it's been, 14 years and not in the playoffs and different things. And yes, it's an irritant, and yes, it's something that everybody wants to see changed. But what does it really mean in comparison to genuine, heartfelt relationships that are personal, that bring passion, that bring support, that bring you comfort? Something totally different entirely.
Gary Gerould joining us. When I was talking about Jerry last week, and I think the question was, what is it about, Jerry, so he's in such an open book, and the question was, what is it about Jerry Reynolds maybe that you see behind the scenes that the public doesn't see? And I thought for a while about that, because again, Jerry just puts himself out there, and G-Man, the only thing I could think of is that people know that Jerry's funny. They know he has a sense of humor. I don't think they have a real grasp as to how amazing his sense of humor can be, especially behind closed doors. Is there anything you could share about Jerry that, I don't know, maybe kind of down the same lines that people maybe just don't have the whole story on?
Well, I don't think of specific instances right off the top of my head, but you're spot on. I mean, it's not just what you hear on a broadcast with Jerry. It's right. Not what you hear when he goes and addresses the Rotary or whatever. That's Jerry Reynolds. Yep. I mean, that is JR. And I've just cherished over the years. He's always, when we traveled on the King's Charter, and he always sat directly behind me. And we're in the last two rows in the back of the airplane. And frequently after a game, we get on board and we grab an appetizer or something to munch on, and we're looking at box scores and we're checking out other things around the league, and his passion for the game and his contacts and all of the things, but always with this sense of humor. And sometimes it's just blatantly slapstick. Other times it's very subtle. Make no mistake, Jerry Reynolds is a cagey individual. Mm-hmm. And sure, he plays that little self-deprecation humor game to the max sometimes. But boy, he's got a basketball brain, and he's sharp, and he's just so many things that just make him so special in my mind. He is unique. I think back over the years, and I think, okay, who reminds me of Jerry Reynolds that I've known? No one.
Nobody.
I mean, nobody. Nobody fits that particular mode. And to hear him talk about, his contacts and fellows that he would reach out to, and he stayed in contact with Larry Bird frequently, still does, and hearing him tell stories. Well, he said, I talked to Bird today, and he's an irascible old fart, and he's talking about this and that, and it just makes you chuckle. I just again, nobody like him.
I think that's perfect what you said, because Jerry is folksy. Jerry is simple, but people, I think, mix folksy and simple sometimes with, I don't know, a dullard or somebody who, point being, I'm so glad you said that, because when you get in that basketball conversation with Jerry, even off the air where it's, he's got to get his timing in and out, and, he's only got so much to say, but maybe that's it. I think it wouldn't take anybody by surprise, because he's been a coach, he's been a GM, as you said, he's worn every hat, but you're absolutely right. What maybe people forget about is behind the folksy and the simple and the nice guy and all that, he is a heck of a basketball mind.
Yeah, and he's qualified in so many different areas, and I've often said over the years, I've loved the fact that I've been in some really unique opportunities as a broadcaster and doing network television for close to 40 years, and doing NFL football for 8 years or so, and if you want an analyst, give me somebody who's done the things that Jerry Reynolds has done, because they can address every facet of the game, whatever sport you're talking about. And that's what makes him so likable, and why we flock to him. It was always fun before games on the home floor to have a Jason Ross and a Deuce Mason and a Mo Reagan and yourself and Damian Barling and whomever, just everybody wanting to hear what Jerry had to say about something. He's magnetic in that sense. And then when you're on the road, it's the respect that is shown to him by not only other broadcasters around the league, but other assistant coaches, head coaches, officials. I mean, what a great ambassador for the sport, and what a guy who is just genuinely loved. Those are just some of the things that make him so special in our mind.
That's the great Jerry Reynolds we're talking about, and Jerry Reynolds Week will continue tomorrow with Greg Lukenbill joining us at 8:05.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Oh, gee, man, if I can just get him to talk a little bit. That's the thing. You got to get Greg out of his shell.
Oh, and Luke will have stories, and he just, there's nobody like him. And let me just say it. I've said it countless times over the past 35 to 38 years. This city, Kings fans, sports fans in general, owe such a debt of gratitude to Greg Lukenbill, because he made it happen. And I just, when things looked impossible, he found a way. And I just, you have to give the man credit for what he was able to accomplish at a time when it didn't look like it was remotely possible. And yet here we are now, going into year 36 of the Kings in Sacramento, thanks to Greg.
Amen. Well, we look forward to talking to him tomorrow. G-Man, I say on a personal note, but I know everyone listening is echoing this. We're so happy that you're back, and I think you know this, but not because, hey, the old guy's coming back, he should come back as long as he wants, but because you're so good, you haven't lost a step. You've been moved all around every arena. The game has gotten crazier. You do not lose a step. It is a warm cup of hot chocolate. It is a fire in the fireplace. It is the teddy bear. It is the sense of comfort and stability that Kings fans, throughout all the troubles on floor, off floor, I think all of us. I don't know if this will happen or not. I sure don't. And if it doesn't, so be it. But I want to win a championship for this city. I want this city to have a parade on J Street, COVID-free, of course. But I think I speak for every Kings fan that whenever it does happen, we all hope that you're on the call for that as well.
Well, you're beyond kind, Dave, and I that genuinely means so much to me, and I truly appreciate that. Thank you again.
The best. the legendary Jerry, the best, the legendary, and then I screw his name up. The best and the legendary. You see, I went back into Jerry Reynolds. I'm sitting here trying to love you here. Gary Gerould, one of the absolute best in the business, and the difference in this interview between a professional and a guy who used to call the shows. G-Man, thank you so much for hanging out with us this morning.
Oh, my pleasure, lad. My pleasure. Have fun and continue, JR. Stay in our lives. That bright light burning, brother.
Amen. That's the G-Man, Gary Gerould. We will be right back.
It's the Carmichael Dave Show on Sports 1140 KHTK.